Thank you all for having me here today. I'm very excited to be speaking with you, and thank you specifically to William for having me come here to give this talk today. I'm a certified clinical hypnotherapist. I also have certifications as a transpersonal hypnotherapist and an interpersonal hypnotherapist. I have a practice located in downtown Charleston. I'm going into my 5th year of practice, and I see clients that range in age from little ones, like 5 years old, into their 70s. I see people that come to me for all different types of things. My job is like a box of chocolates. People show up and they come to see me to solve problems, look for new ways to do things, address things that they've had issues with that they just can't seem to address. I get clients come to me where they're like, I can't stop this behavior. I can't stop these feelings. I can't seem to heal. I can't find peace. I can't find purpose. I can't seem to focus, to be motivated. I can't seem to sleep. And what's happening is they're coming to see me because they're trying to problem solve with their conscious mind, the 10%. 10%, that place that is trying to problem solve, come up with solutions, and then later they find themselves frustrated or repeating the same behaviors or having the same patterns because they're operating from this 10%. Now, I don't know, how many of you are freshmen? How many upperclassmen? Okay, so maybe this stuff is going to be kind of, old news to you, but I'll just go through it. I'm going to walk through today, talk about hypnosis, how it works, why it works, how I use it in my practice, and then I'll also talk a little bit about the history of hypnosis, where it stemmed from, and some of the key players along the way. And this lecture, I'd like it to be like my practice, cooperational. So if at any point you want to ask any questions, just raise your hand and please do so, okay? Also, I'll be taking questions at the end. So clients come to see me because they're like, I can't do this. What's going on? I need some help. Well, they're working in the 10%, the conscious mind, but we've got 90% is the subconscious. And the subconscious takes care of all of our involuntary bodily functions. I think of the subconscious and the conscious, I use the metaphor of like the conscious is sort of like your desktop. It's all the stuff you see there. You know what's happening, but you don't really have the applications to manipulate it. It's just sort of there. And that's that 10%. They theorize that the conscious mind processes about 40 bits of data per second, and the subconscious processes over 40 million bits of data per second, right? It does everything. And it's not just a place in your mind, it's this whole system, right? So it takes care of all of our involuntary bodily functions. So the fact that I'm talking to you without having to think about talking, the fact that I'm digesting my lunch, the fact that my blood pressure is a certain way, the fact that my nerves are working at a certain way, all of these things are happening at the subconscious level. So I do work with clients for health and wellness. Now, when I work with clients for health and wellness, I do get a referral from a doctor, but I do work with that in adjunct to working with their doctor. It holds all of our memories. So every experience we've ever had is somewhere in this great database. And for good or for bad, it front loads the negative memories. So it doesn't want us to repeat those things that we've done before, right? And also, with these memories and experiences we have, we form our attitudes and beliefs. So I work with clients around memories. I help clients with attitudes and beliefs. Attitudes and beliefs can be supportive and positive, or they can be limiting and blocking. So we help to transform attitudes and beliefs or adopt new ones. Emotions. The subconscious is the seat of our emotions. There's no emotion organ, right? And it's the whole system. And they call them feelings because we can actually feel them, right? So in my practice, I do a lot of body work with my clients as well. Talk to them about when we bring up and talk about emotions, I'm like, where are you feeling that in your body? And I'll talk a little bit about my process and how I incorporate that into the work. So our emotions, work with clients to help transform emotions. Work with clients where they're like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling these anxious feelings, or I'm always getting angry at the drop of a hat. It's coming from the subconscious. Habits. A lot of people, I think of hypnosis and they think of smoking and weight loss. Smoking is a pretty small percentage of my practice. I do work with a lot of clients around weight loss. Habits, that's subconscious. Its primary goal is to support you and to take care of you. And it just watches everything you do. So you can come to a hypnotherapist or hypnotist to help them at the deeper level, but you can also be aware of what you're doing and what you're programming in yourself and your thoughts and your ideas that we're taking in. But habits is just a way where that subconscious has said, oh, look, I've looked at these situations, these memories, and you had something happened and there's an attitude and belief about that, and you throw in some emotion, and let's make that a habit, right? And so you can do something, it becomes something first conscious, then becomes in the subconscious. Imagination and dreams, all part of the subconscious mind. And energy levels in the subconscious. So let me ask you, how many of you here have experienced a state of hypnosis? Just show of hands. How many have not? Okay, everybody put your hand up. We all go into a state of hypnosis multiple times a day. It's a naturally occurring state, and I'm going to talk more about that, but it is. We go into hypnosis about 7 times a day. What happens in the state of hypnosis? Well, between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, there's something called the critical factor or critical filter, and this is a phenomenon, a gateway between the conscious and subconscious. It starts to develop around the age of 9, solidified about the age of 15. Before then, and it acts as a gateway between the conscious and the subconscious. Before then, there is no gateway, just totally open, a sponge. So kids that are younger than 9, and really 5 and younger, are actually operating in a state of hypnosis almost all the time. It's a measurable brain wavelength activity. It's alpha state, theta state. Kids live in their imagination, right? Everything, this key is a phone, this is this, they're just make-believe all the time. But they're also establishing and building their attitudes and beliefs. Mom, we don't do this when that happens, right? They're pulling their attitudes and beliefs. Everything's coming in. There's nothing to stop it. It's just coming in there, and it's creating the foundation, the programming for this supercomputer of your subconscious mind. And then around the age of 9, this guy starts to show up, this gateway. Sometimes he feels like an ogre, So clients come, what happens is they consciously want to change something, they want to do something, they think about it. They're like, okay, next time when I go to that party, I'm not going to drink that much. Or when I go to give that presentation to my boss, I'm not going to be anxious. Or I'm really just going to stop eating cookies. I'm not going to eat those cookies that are there. These are the thoughts we have. But then that thought comes down to the gatekeeper, the critical factor, and it's like, hold on, let me look behind the scenes. No, I'm sorry. That idea does not go with what's going on in here. Reject it. And there we are, repeating the same patterns, feelings, emotions, thoughts, and ideas. So, not only is the subconscious driving the bus 90% of the time, influencing our thoughts, ideas, our attitudes, our beliefs, our emotions, our habits, it's coming from the perspective of a 5-year-old or younger. So when we get into those feelings when we're like, oh my gosh, I went from saying that I'm going to do this right and I'm not going to get anxious or I'm not going to be mad, I'm going to be on and this is my idea. And then boom, something pushes a button and you can feel overwhelmed. You ate the cookies, whatever it was, you slid right from the conscious where you had those great ideas into the automatic subconscious. So what do we do about this? We use hypnosis. When you have a hypnotic state, what happens, the technical definition is, it is a bypassing the critical factor for the establishment of acceptable selective thinking. So what happens is, you go into a state of hypnosis, and you can do that, there's many ways, and I'll talk about a few of those. And this guy, the critical factor, gets out of the way, temporarily. So you're more open to receiving suggestions so that you can transform things at a deeper level, so that you can create new neural pathways, okay? So we use hypnosis to create this state. And we go in and out of the state of hypnosis naturally. When you wake up in the morning, right now here we're talking, and unless you're daydreaming, if we're talking here listening, we're all probably in a beta state, a beta wavelength, right? When you shift and you start to wind down at night, you go to an alpha state, right? When you go to sleep, we have delta, really deep, and then there's REM. And REM is that place where we have dreams, right? It's when we're processing. And you guys were just talking about the class before how important sleep is, right? That's when it cleans up the computer, takes care of things. It also gives you thoughts and ideas and helps you process things. And it allows the body to go to a state of healing. We can't be in beta state all the time. It's unhealthy. And when you're in a beta state more than you should be, that's when you have elevated cortisol levels. So using hypnosis, practicing hypnosis and or meditation allows one to manifest that alpha state. And if you practice, or you could go to a theta state. And when that happens, it's a natural state of healing. Side effects are better sleep, lower cortisol. And it doesn't matter what kind of suggestions you're listening to or work, but just achieving that state helps for healing. In fact, interesting, there's a, when they put in, do an organ transplant, they'll actually purposefully up your cortisol levels so that the blood, because when our cortisol goes up to your arms and your legs, right? And it doesn't attack the organs. So when you go into an alpha state, it allows all the stuff to come back and take care of the organs and heal the body. Now, so hypnotic state, there's, I'll give you a perfect example of when we go into hypnosis. So we do it, things, you can do it if you like to run, if you like to do art, if you like to, those things where you're in the zone, you're in a state of hypnosis. You go into an alpha state. It's focused awareness. Now, sometimes that comes with deep relaxation. Other times it can just be that, you know, you're in that place, right? If you go to, I'll give you a perfect example where the conscious and the subconscious is working. You go to, or like this, maybe not this room so much, but we go to a movie. You walk into a movie theater. You come in, totally in the conscious mind. You're like, which seat am I going to take? Where am I going to sit? What's the best seat? How far am I from the screen? Sit down. Pretty soon, gets dark, focused awareness on the screen, right? And what happens is we get suggestions. We get keys, music, the titles, the action starts happening. Pretty soon, we're in a state of hypnosis. It's suspended disbelief. I watch that movie and I take in those suggestions and I don't watch it and think, here comes actor A from the side and actor B and what kind of camera are they using and what is this happening? No, I'm just there and it becomes real. You're entranced for 2 hours. You are in trance. So if I'm watching that and something happens, it's really a lot of action, you know, I could have like get scared. My blood pressure could change in involuntary bodily functions, right? Based on suggestion. Then if something happens and, oh my God, the dog died, who was so sweet, I could cry, you know, my emotions are evoked. If it has something, if this movie really resonates with my attitudes and belief systems, I could get out of that movie and be like, you know what, I'm gonna quit my job or I'm gonna do this, it's inspiring, right? Changes. If it goes against your attitudes and belief system, you could really feel a rub, right? Your friend might like it, but you're like, I hate that movie, right? It causes all these things. You're in a state of hypnosis. So we go in and out of hypnosis all the time. So, oh, and one important thing I would say. So hypnosis, one is always in control when doing hypnosis. It's all self-hypnosis. And remember the conscious mind, the subconscious. What happens? That gateway just moves away when you're in hypnosis. Conscious is still there. So you'll never say or do something you're not comfortable with. And just like being in that movie, let's say I really cry because the dog has died. My friend says to me, Hillary, you know it's just a movie. I'd say, yeah, I know it's just a movie. It's the same thing with hypnosis. You're always in control. You're never out of control. You never get stuck, the same way you never get stuck in sleep. These are some of the modalities that I use in my practice. I'll just gloss over these quickly, and if you, at any point, if there's anything that you want to talk about more specifically, I'm happy to do so. But I do take an integrative approach. I'm always about learning and learning new things. I think neuroscience is amazing, and I'm always about learning new tricks that I can use. In my process, my philosophy is I want to give my clients tools every time they leave, whether it's a recording to listen to, or it might be a way to process feelings in the moment, a way that they can connect with their conscious mind by being aware of what's happening in the subconscious, so they don't have those moments of, but you can start to come up. So I work with a lot of mindfulness, meditation, connecting and focusing about what's going on, conscious, subconscious mind. Reframing, I use neurolinguistic programming, and conversational hypnosis, which is a lot of metaphor. to help the client kind of look for new conclusions within the situation, or reframing where they're actually storing those memories and how they're storing the memories within the brain. Hypnotic programming, that's kind of like sort of what most people I think of, where you go to the hypnotist or the hypnotherapist and they put you in a state and they say stuff to you, and then there's a recording of it and you listen to that. It's very powerful foundation work. It's maybe not going to work for everyone 100% because it can be a process. If you've got really strong attitudes, belief system in there, or if you've really got strong emotions, then you might take some sessions to work with that client. I typically, on average, see clients around 5 sessions. Sometimes less, sometimes once, sometimes more. Resolving inner conflict. This is where I will do a follow-up. It's usually not the first session, but I'll talk to the client. They've had these tools. They've been using them. I come back. It's like I've given them a pair of shoes to walk around in. I'm like, how's your shoes? And they're like, pretty good. Feels good. But you know what? The tongue was rubbing me a little bit. But you know, you taught me that trick. So I just loosened it, but it's still there. So we talk about the parts of them that are coming up. So if there was a part of them that was stressed, and then there's another part that said, have some candy, you'll feel better. And there's a part that thinks like, oh, now I'm frustrated because I had the candy. So we break down the parts, and we talk to the parts in hypnosis, and they talk to each other, and they find new ways of being, new roles, new jobs that they can do to help that client in totality so there's less conflict. I do resolving inner conflict. I do use regression work, age regression, past life regression, to help go to root cause, to process that. It's kind of like a house of cards. If you only knew now what you knew, if you only knew then what you know now, and bringing that back to realize that they are safe, they are sound, they are loved, that you can start to let go of some of those feelings that are the root cause. I do something called breath work, which is circular breathing, and it causes an altered state. It's a very powerful tool. It works at a physical level, and it works at an emotional level, and then eventually it brings a memory to surface and we process. And okay, so let's do a little quick experiment together. Or I should say experience together. Okay, let's all close our eyes. And I'd like for you to just imagine, sense, or feel as if I've just walked into the room and I'm holding a platter, and on this platter is a big, juicy, sour, yellow, ripe lemon. And I cut a big wedge out of that sour, juicy, yellow, ripe lemon, and I give it to you, and you take it up to your mouth, and you take a big bite of that sour, juicy, yellow, ripe lemon, whether you like the taste of lemon or not. And that juice goes all down your tongue and your throat, that sour, sour, juicy, yellow, ripe lemon. Okay, we're gonna open our eyes. And so anyone experience a physical manifestation? Yeah. How about see the lemon? Yeah. Smell the lemon? Right? So how long did that take? A few seconds? Power of suggestion, right? And imagination. Using your imagination, and people work differently. Some people are going to be more kinesthetic. Some people are going to be auditory, visual. But you just, in a very short period of time, you had some of us had a physical manifestation of something. It's pretty amazing, right? So this all sounds logical, right? So where does this whole idea of the mystic hypnotist who's going to mind control you come from? Dr. Mesmer. The word mesmerize comes directly from Dr. Mesmer. Now, Dr. Mesmer, he believed, he was living in Vienna and then moved to Paris in the 1800s, late 1700s, 18th century, late 1700s. And he had this belief system that every living thing has this animal magnetism, a superfine fluid that runs through us, and that he could control it. Okay, so this is the beginning of this idea of the mystic, right? And that there's an operator who's going to control what's happening. And so his idea was that he could control, if this fluid didn't move in a proper way, it would have blocks. If there was blocks or it was off, that he could use the power of his abilities to readdress these blocks and get the fluid moving properly. So he became so popular in that people were coming to see him in droves. He actually was, what he would do at first, he was using magnets. And so he would see his patients and he'd rub these magnets over them for like hours at a time. And what would happen is they would fatigue. They would go into a trance because he's doing something in a kind of repetitive way, right? And so they believed in him, the power of belief. So they believed in him. They were seeing results, right? So they start coming to him, the rich, the elite. They think he's amazing. They're giving him a ton of money. He makes this thing called the baquette, which is a giant round kind of like container that's filled with some mystery fluid, and it's got these iron rods and ropes, and the people would put their affected areas up against this metal bar, and then they'd all hold hands. Now, what's going on in here? He's got this room where the environment is like incense in it. He's got Benjamin Franklin's invention of the glass organ is playing, like woo, weird music, right? He's got candles, mirrors, and he's got all these people there that are believing this stuff is working. So he's creating an environment that is really conducive for hypnosis, just like a movie. This is a production happening, right? People start laughing crazy and having convulsions, which causes the other person to pick up on it, right? So they've got this collective agreement that this thing is happening, and people actually see results. He becomes so popular that at some point he can't see enough people and have them, and he's also, by the way, walking around with gold slippers and a purple cape and waving his wand. I mean, like the whole thing is, a whole production, a scene. And he gets so popular that at some point he starts magnetizing trees with his power so that people could grab the tree and then they would go through the same process and become cured. And people were seeing results. Well, that, the whole situation had the king annoyed. Yes?
So is this like the big, what was it called, a what? A
baquette?
But yeah, that. Is that kind of like the beginnings of, so like a sensory box or something? I don't know, where like there's like the fluid and you get in it and like you float for like, what is that thing called?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. That, yeah.
Is that what it is?
No, they're actually on the outside. They're not on the, the whole thing is that he could have a purple cat and tell people that the purple cat is what is going to cure them. He just made this thing that looked like this and it has fluid in it. So it doesn't really have anything to do with the object. It has to do with what they're thinking. And the fact that they're there as a collective unit, they're going into a state of trance. There's, all these things that are creating this environment, just like watching a movie, right? Hollywood does this, but in a different way, okay? So the king is annoyed, King Louis, and so he creates a royal commission with luminaries like Benjamin Franklin and Guillotine that get together, and they are like, all right, we got to find out what is going on with this animal magnetism and mesmer. So they actually create the first ever placebo-controlled medical experiments. What they do is they take the tree that Mesmer has mesmerized, right, where people are holding onto it, and then they pick another tree that has not been mesmerized, and they have the placebo and the control. And so they find out that both of them see results. So they deem it a fake because there's not really anything to do with mesmerism. But the truth is, what they found is the conclusion, it worked by the act of the imagination. And again, that's where the subconscious lives and our power of our beliefs, right? So he was healing, but it just wasn't for the reason that he thought. Dr. Braid, he coined the term hypnosis, and he was totally against mesmerism. He thought it doesn't have to do with magic. It has nothing to do with the power of an individual. It's all within ourselves. And through his experiments and research, he found that by doing ocular fixation, by staring at something in a certain manner, it will cause stress in the eyes, which will put you into a sense of trance, which is why the whole look at my watch, right? I don't do that, but it's because you're looking at something in a stared way. And so he went on to write a book, one of the first book on hypnosis, and it was more from a clinical standpoint and nothing to do with magic and mysticism. Dr. Esdale, he was a Scottish surgeon who went to Calcutta and was working in the poorest conditions. It was at a time when there was no anesthesia. And he was working on people that were prisoners he was working with to do surgery. And he had, because of the things that were going on with this particular disease, it was causing these huge tumors. And a lot of these patients, believe it or not, had tumors in the scrotal area. I mean, like, talk about like the most painful thing, enormous tumors. So he was looking for a solution, like, how can I do with this? How can I address this where I'm going to try to bring some kind of comfort to the situation? Because this person's going to die if they don't have the surgery, but they're going to die if I just do it without any anesthesia. So he finds a mesmer pamphlet. And he says, he talks to his associate, he's like, do you know about this mesmer? No. All right, have you done this before? No. All right, well, let's try it. So they take the prisoner with the tumor, and they perform these techniques from this pamphlet on him. And they do it for hours and hours and hours until they, through testing, that he has created actually a hypnoanesthesia based on this kind of like deep trance this person has entered. And he performs the surgery. The person lives, he heals quickly, and he goes on to perform 300 major and 1,000 minor operations using hypnoanesthesia techniques that were based on this pamphlet from Mesmer. So the 20th century, we have a shift where hypnosis techniques cross the pond, and there's significant breakthroughs in the 20th century using hypnosis. And it became more popular to the layman, hypnosis. So who's heard of the Mayo Clinic? Okay. So I'm going to tell you a really interesting point about the Mayo Clinic. So over here we have Dr. Monroe, and he was from Omaha, Nebraska, at a time when ether was used, okay? Now, if not used correctly, you would die from the ether, okay? So you can imagine he had a lot of nervous patients that were going to go into surgery, and frankly, were just so anxious. So he found, he'd discovered through, you know, as I said, the books and things that he was studying about hypnosis. So he'd use hypnosis techniques and a pre-talk before the surgery. He'd get them into a light trance, and he'd tell them, you're going to do great. You're going to heal well. It's going to be fine. And you know what? He got results. They healed quickly. And he started to test it, and he started easing back on the ether. And he found that he could use less and less ether and have the same kind of results. Therefore, putting that patient in a safer place. And they'd heal better. They'd heal faster. So he takes his findings, he performs about 100 consecutive surgeries using this technique, and he creates a white paper. Now you can imagine it's not the internet age, right? So he gets in his carriage and he goes around the Midwest and he meets with doctors and he presents this paper. And some people think it's bunk and they don't want to pay attention to it, but you know who doesn't? Is the Mayo brothers. And they have dinner with him after. And he talks to him about his techniques. They leave. That night they go to the hospital and they share these techniques with Anne McGraw, who's their #1 nurse who does most of the anesthesia administration. And they teach her the techniques, and they start that night #1 of 17,000 deep abdominal surgeries without a single death due to the anesthesia using these hypnosis techniques. And they become hugely successful. And a key component of that is because they use the mental capacity of ourselves to go to a place of calm and serene instead of just having to use the ether, and to heal quickly. Eventually, Nurse McCraw had created she created her own study, a paper, and she would give presentations on it, but it wasn't, you know, widely promoted. And truthfully, they kind of kept it on the down low because there were, you know, people that had considered that maybe as like, you know, magic or things like that. Dave Ellman. So Dave Ellman, he's an interesting individual. He also from the Midwest. He was from the Midwest, and when he was a young boy, his father had cancer. And the last couple months of his life, he was in so much pain that he couldn't really spend any time with his father. His father was just off in the room, and he wouldn't get to see his dad. And then he remembered that this mysterious doctor came to visit him, who was friends with his dad. And people theorized that it's Dr. Monroe, the one who taught the Mayo brothers. And after seeing, he was a hypnotist and used hypnosis, and after he saw his father didn't recover from the cancer, but he was in enough comfort that he could spend the last couple weeks of his life with his family, spending time with them. And that really inspired Elman to want to learn more about hypnosis. He started to get every book that he could. Then I'm talking about when he was in high school. And he started to practice techniques on his friends and his colleagues, or his students, fellow students. And he discovered a couple things. One of the books that he read was a doctor said, well, I noticed that when a patient comes in to see me and we do hypnosis once, and then they come back next time and we do hypnosis again, they seem to go in deeper each time that we do it. And he's like, well, why do I have to wait for them to come back? So he just created this idea that you induce someone into hypnosis, you bring them out of hypnosis slightly, you put them back in hypnosis, you bring them out, you put them in. You see that on stage shows when people do that. They're like have them come up and they'll be like, sleep, and then they come up and sleep. So he took this idea and brought that into this idea of fractionation and deepening by reinduction. He also, at this young age, he went and sought out an eye doctor to talk about, what is it about the eye and how it fatigues and causes trance. And so what he learned was that the eye evolves to see in a jumping pattern. Right? It's not about smooth. So when you do something that's smooth and have a fixed focus on that, that also induces trance, which kind of makes sense with that whole mesmer thing when they keep passing the same way in a smooth manner. He went on to have a career in early radio and television production, and then he felt like my real calling is really to use hypnosis, to go back to that. So he wrote several books. One of them is a very well-known book, Hypnosis, and he spent the rest of his life teaching, even though he wasn't a doctor, teaching doctors and dentists how to incorporate hypnosis into their practice to improve the situation so that clients can feel more calm, feel more comfortable, create hypnoanesthesia. Erickson is an amazing psychiatrist who was very smart. And he has a very personal relationship with hypnosis. He started using hypnosis as self-hypnosis. When he was 17 years old, he had polio, and he was in much pain. So he started studying hypnosis and using self-hypnosis techniques to help aid with the discomfort, to a point where he could be mobile. He went on and got a degree in psychiatry and developed this technique of hypnotherapy that is known as Ericksonian approach. And it's very conversational. And if there's not much, but there's footage of him working with patients doing hypnosis. And a lot of it is metaphor. So he embraced things like jokes and puns and stories. And I do this especially with little ones when they come in. And little ones, they're already in a state of hypnosis, right? So I don't have to do much. I just have to listen to what's going on with them, and then I use stories and metaphor to teach them something, and I'll make a recording of that for them to listen to. For example, a little one who came to see me who was bedwetting. And we talked about that this client likes sports and is good at sports, so we just use that as the metaphor that you know the right time when it is to catch the ball and how long to hold it before you throw it, and your body knows what to do and those kind of things. And sure enough, at a subconscious level, the subconscious gets it, and it makes for change. Erickson was big about follow the lead of the client. Excuse me. He was about follow the lead of the client. If you need to be aggressive or more dominant in your suggestions, then you go that way. If you need to be more, paternal, maternal, you go with the lead of the client. He also started to do things where he would tack suggestions onto truths. So if I said to you, you're sitting in the chair, your feet are on the ground, and your eyes are getting really comfortable, right? You start with one thing and you lead to another. And as I said, he would also do a lot of things with stories, metaphors. He's considered a genius. Dr. Weiss. Now this is late 70s. He has, he's super smart. He went to Columbia and Yale. And but he's the guy behind past life regression, right? So you could say, oh, that seems pretty woo-woo, but you've got this person who started from a very credible background, and he worked with a particular patient who he was using regression in a traditional sense, hypnosis, to regress back to situations, and she is suffering from panic attacks, nightmares, anxiety, and she just one day just started talking about being a Roman soldier. And he's like, where's this going? And so he worked with her and he just followed it. And so she would go to these past lives and he'd help her resolve these past lives and the emotions and the belief systems that were happening in these past lives. And in doing so, her present day life had a major shift. She didn't have the anxiety. She felt more confident. She felt like she was just her true self. Now, past life regression, you know, if you believe in this idea that the soul stores all of our subconscious, soul stores all of our memories. And if you believe that you could incarnate, then in theory, you could take memories from a past incarnation. Or if you just believe that the mind will make up stories and metaphors that will help you heal, then that's okay too. But it does work. I've seen it in my own practice. It's not a majority of what I do in my practice. Most of the time I have clients that want to do this because they want to do it like more as like tourism, you know, like I just want to see where I was and what I was doing. And, but I find that even when that happens, there's usually some kind of epiphany, an aha moment. It's kind of like when you wake from a dream and you're like, wow, right? You have those moments. I had a client come to see me and he was really upset and he's like, I want to come and do this. So we did this past life. He was super specific. He's like, I'm in 1815 and this is happening and this is happening. And it was very emotional. He's like, oh, I'm like, what's happening now? He's like, I just met this woman and I love her so much and she's so lovely. And then we move forward and then all of a sudden he's like, oh my gosh, so emotional, like gonna come out of the chair. I'm like, it's okay, what's going on? He's like, she died, she left me. And then in the past life, you pass over and you go to heaven and you meet with God and you meet with who's ever there to greet you. And he's all of a sudden crying, so joyful. And I'm like, what's happening now? He's like, she's here with me. I am here with her. And he told me after the session, he said, I just found out that the person I was with in my relationship had been dishonest with me for quite a long time, and I really felt like I'd never find love again. And he's like, from this experience, I believe I will. So things, you know, I mean, maybe that's the mind creating something for you, but it can be very interesting and healing work. Mary Monaghan, she created this technique where she sort of perfected this technique of hypnobirthing. So it's using hypnosis to help moms when the baby's in utero, shown that the baby is, you know, when the mom's calm and she's feeling good, you know, that the baby's picking up with that in the development. And when you're in utero, babies in utero, they're in REM the entire time. So they're in there processing things. And then hypnosis for birth. When you use hypnobirthing, it's more comfortable, less discomfort, much faster births, and much less bleeding and healing quicker. Okay, so we know who this guy is, but who's that guy? This guy, Tiger Woods, his dad, and this is Dr. Jay Brunza. Dr. Jay Brunza is a psychiatrist and a hypnotherapist, and he's worked with Tiger Woods since he was 13 years old. He was his caddy until he had a professional caddy. So he was doing hypnosis while he was playing in his games. He used hypnosis for his edge all the time. So he uses hypnosis to do time distortion, slow things down, to be more present, to build confidence, to visualize his shots. And there's a lot of things about visualization, creating these movies in your head using hypnosis, so then it actually can execute. Sheila Granger, she created this modality technique called virtual gastric band, and it basically is the idea that you use hypnosis and you take someone through the surgery of getting a gastric band put on in the body installed, but obviously there isn't one. I use this approach in my practice. I find that with clients, after the first week, they're eating 50 to 70% less food, because it's the imagination, the power of belief. Bruce Lipton, he is epigenetics and studies how the conscious controls every character of every cell. And he's a huge supporter of hypnosis and healing. Just go a little quick on this so we have time for questions. So the true heroes truly are our own selves, right? That the body has an amazing ability to change, that we have neuroplasticity, that we can learn new things, create new belief systems, break habits, develop new habits, and we can do this using the power of our own mind, our beliefs, mind, soul, and spirit. Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Questions are welcome.
Yes.
You said that someone has went back to a past life that they felt like they lived in 1815. Would that be the same as sometimes you have like deja vu, like you've been in a situation before and you feel like you've been here or you've met someone before? Would that be similar?
Sure. So the question is, is a past life this kind of similar sense of deja vu or those kind of things? When I do past life regressions, I talk about the different models that can happen, and there's 3 different models. One is traditional regression, right? This idea that reincarnation, I should say, that I'm a soul, that I incarnate in the future in a timeline, right? That's one way. Another is this idea of transpersonal, where transmigrational, where a soul could be in a human being, and then it could be in a fish, and it could be in a tree. Another way is this idea of an oversoul. So this idea that, if I put my hand in a bucket of paint and I pulled it out like this, I've got one source, but there's multiple things coming off of it. So to answer your question, I don't know factually. I mean, I think that there's interesting things to think about, that, like that idea of the oversoul. So you could have different sort of a soul living kind of in different people at the same times in the same time periods. And I've seen that, and I talk about this stuff in the upfront. So if I have a client, and I've seen it, I've had a client that's like, I feel like I'm a horse right now. I'm like, okay, trot around, and then we'll move forward, But they never, act like a horse, right? But they're just like, I feel like I'm in this. And I've also had clients where they're like, I feel like I'm in the 80s and I'm a 12-year-old kid. But they were alive at the same point, so that doesn't make any sense. Who knows? Maybe it's all metaphor. Maybe it is connecting with some deep memory. Maybe it's a deep memory from a movie you saw when you were a kid. It's whatever, though. Your computer's like, I'm serving this up to you. It's the same. Why does it serve up certain dreams, right? So I do think, though, that there's times when I feel like, for me personally, where I feel like, oh my gosh, I totally had this thought where I was supposed to do something, and then it's gone. I don't know. Maybe that's my oversoul doing something over there. But
But now another question.
Yeah.
Well, when I was a teenager, like at different aspects, even from childhood, I would have experiences where I don't know if I was dreaming or I would be able to see everything going on in the house, or even in someone else's house.
Right.
Like I was out of my body and I was looking down on myself and my parents sleeping. And then there were a couple of instances where I did get out of my bed and walk into their room, but I was asleep.
Right.
So I'm trying to figure out, and it stopped, I guess when I turned 12.
Right.
But I still remember those things.
Right, and there's people that practice really deep levels of meditation where they have outer body experiences and that they use them to, and there's ideas that the military uses as kind of techniques to, who knows, there's so much stuff. I think that the power of the mind and our abilities, if you look at, there's an organization called Heart Math. Are you familiar with that? They do amazing things. There's a movie on Netflix called I Am. If you have Netflix, it's really good. And they go to the lab and they show things. But for example, they do an experiment where they put the electrodes on somebody and they flash like puppy, car accident, and they watch how the brain reacts to those different stimuli. And pretty soon they will say the brain will react to what's going to be the car accident before they even show the car accident. How's that happening? They did an experiment where they have yogurt in front of a person and they've got electrometer to the yogurt, and the person starts exhibiting emotions. The yogurt is initially at 0, and then it goes meh. So there's a lot of things I think that we don't know yet. Any other questions? Yes.
Is this the kind of thing, like the repetitive thing? Is that why a lot of people are like really into music because it has like the repetitive and like when people are like, oh, I'm so angry, I'm gonna go listen to music, and like it calms them down.
Yeah, so music can definitely be a stimulant, not stimulant, stimulate the state of that hypnosis state, right? And it could through trance. And in fact, early tribes would use drums to create trance, right? And they would use drums and chanting to create that trance state. So yeah, that's a good example. Mm-hmm. Yes.
How does it help with pain management for people like with autoimmune diseases where stress is one of the number one things that can cause flares?
Right. So I approach that a couple ways. First of all, I always have a referral from the doctor, but I would work on it from multiple approaches. One way that I can do, which is helpful, but I think it's more of a Band-Aid, is I can teach clients how to self-hypnosis and do their own management of that. So for example, teach them ways that they can put themselves into hypnosis, or I might create a recording for them to listen to. And then they could visualize, you know, sort of like their body as like a control room, and that they have a dial that can dial down discomfort. That could bring in, if they have the discomfort in their abdomen, if that represents like a red is that discomfort color, and they find a color that is cool and soothing, and they can paint that into there. So that can help manage discomfort. But I see a lot with my clients that it goes to what you're saying, the stress, the emotional things, and you know, secondary gains, right? This idea of if you have something, you know, you're doing something for some other reason. I see this often with pain, and it's often not at conscious level. So, you know, I had a client that was seeing me. This client had fibromyalgia, and about once a month was in the emergency room, you know, for really, you know, painful. And so I taught this client how to use that technique of dialing down that, and that was good to help manage it when it happened. But then we started to really get at the root of the cause and discover this has to do with anxiety that's around social anxiety, and that's helping her feel more confident and comfortable in those situations, as well as helping her find her voice to communicate that I don't want to do this, or I'm only going to do it at this level, and this is my comfort zone. And when she could do that, that was the real tool. Because she was manifesting that pain, those flare-ups, because she didn't want to go to something or participate in something.
Now, you were saying that you take referrals from doctors. So what would make a doctor recommend one of their patients to you?
Well, I mean, you know, my practice is quite young. I've been in practice for this going into my 5th year. So, you know, as I'm working with more clients and they're talking to doctors and they're seeing the results, then I'm getting refers that way. But I'm talking about when a client calls me up and says, I want to work on this and this, and if it's, you know, if it's a diagnosed disorder, whether that's psychological or medical, I always need a referral before I will work with them. So I'm asking for referral to talk to their doctor to give to me.
Okay. I was talking for myself. I have lupus as well, which is very close to the fibromyalgia. So I was just trying to think, okay, if I contact my rheumatologist, my lupus doctor, exactly what do I need to say in order to get him to send a referral to?
Right, you know, it's mostly, especially with pain, I don't want to, if somebody comes to me and they're like, I'm having these headaches all the time, and I teach them these tools and then they're covering something up that really is an issue, I don't want to do that, right? So it's mostly for your own safety. I want to make sure that you're safe, that the doctor knows that this is an adjunct, that I'm helping you to manage those stress levels, things like that. But even just right now, do you practicing meditation and or, you know, doing any kind of hypnosis to relax yourself? That's going to start to help. Because we know cortisol raises and then it makes everything so sensitive, right? Yeah. Yes.
So is this practice used to like help with repressed memories and stuff, and like post-traumatic stress disorder? Like, is that? Do you work with that?
I do. And again, if someone is diagnosed with PSTD, then I would work in adjunct with their therapist. And my job isn't to go in there and be like, let's fish around and find stuff, right? That's not what I'm to do. But the way it works is, and I don't ever start with regression work. That's something that I do. I try to, you know, I do other things. And then a regression can be very helpful though. And all I do is I talk about the way you're feeling now, the feelings that you have, and a lot of it connects to where they're feeling it physically.
and the attitudes and beliefs about those feelings?
You do hypnosis and you go back to the first time you ever felt that way, and it can be, you know, when they're little ones, and it sets off a kind of like a whole seed of things. It's initial sensitizing events, right? There's an event that happens and it causes a strong emotional imprint. There's attitudes and beliefs that are established along with this event. And that is like, I use like the metaphor, it's like your subconscious is like a perfect little squishy oyster. And then we have this experience, it's like, and there's a little piece of sand. And then something else like it forms another layer. And then like another experience like it, another layer, and another layer. And then those are our pearls of wisdom. And the subconscious wants to front load the stuff that's going to harm us. So that's why I could be in a situation with somebody and they're at a 10 about something and I might be at a 4 about something. Because it's my programming, right? Any other questions? All right, well, thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure. All right.